to another powerful conversation with yet another powerful woman. I am joined today by the wonderful Emma Davies. She is joining me from across the other side of the pond, shall we say, from Nova Scotia, which is pretty exciting. It's still fairly early in the morning for me, so it must be pretty early in the morning for you, Emma. So thank you for getting up and joining me today. I will let you introduce yourself quickly, and then I look forward to having a good chat.
Okay, super. So my name is Emma Davies. As you can tell from my accent, despite being in Canada, I am from the UK. I moved to Canada with my husband back in 2020, just as the delightful COVID delayed my my permits to be here. So yeah, I've been here for just over 3 years now with a bit of back and forth. Started off in BC, moved to Nova Scotia, where I am now setting up my business that I've been slowly setting up over those 3 years whilst waiting to get fully legal and all of that.
Yeah, and just before we get onto like the business side of things, what is it like being in Canada and in Nova Scotia? My geography is not great, but I know from watching Race Across the World recently that Nova Scotia was in Race Across the World, and like just massive nature, one of those places where nature is just like properly in your face.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. We haven't been in Nova Scotia that long yet, but it's stunning. It very, very beautiful in the natural world. Places like Peggy's Cove is one of the sort of more well-known areas here, and Lunenburg is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is a beautiful old town, colourful buildings. I'm looking forward to the fall, as we will now call it in Canada, not the autumn.
Yeah.
Because like the East Coast of America, apparently you get those really beautiful changing of the leaves, and it's meant to be absolutely stunning. So I'm really looking forward to that, which I guess is going to be starting in the next few weeks or so.
Yeah.
So yeah. Beautiful.
Amazing. And tell us about your business, what sort of area you're in and what you do.
Okay, so my business is called The Rebel Flock. So my background is in sort of the corporate world, leadership, but I've always had a real strong belief in not just the power, but the importance of independent businesses. I used to drive people insane when I was, visiting clients. I would want to go and find the independent coffee shop, and I'd book my hotel so I could go to the independent hotel. So I'm very much focusing on independent businesses, sort of collaborative leadership. I think there's a different way to look at hierarchies. I don't think they're as relevant now, even though different roles may require different levels of responsibility. But I think actually you can create I don't just think, I know you can create a very unified and aligned team with just simple tools and processes and strong communication. So I want to really share that out through the Independent Business Network to help people really have a much more enjoyable workplace experience, but also to strengthen the voice of independent business over time.
Yeah, and where do you think that sort of focus on the independents rather than the big corporates, where did that passion come from?
It's actually an interesting question, which I'm not sure, but I think I grew up in Herefordshire in the UK, so it was a smaller town, and for a long time, and even now, there's a thriving independent restaurant business there. There's a lot more independent businesses I remember growing up. Yes, you're seeing more of the sort of national brands coming through now, but I always found independent businesses more creative, they're more interesting. And actually my initial steps in the corporate world, I looked after business across the UK, across Europe and across North America. And over time, I found it was getting more and more common that you could go to high streets in different cities and different countries, and you're starting to see the same stores. And it's sad because you're missing out on a huge part of the culture of a place by not getting access to those independents. And particularly in, more recent years, it's been harder for them. That they're more easily priced out when rents are going up and large businesses getting government support that independent business doesn't always get and can't access. And And I just think they are the heart. I think there's more and more people out there talking about it. Holly Tucker, who created notonthehighstreet.com, she's a huge advocate for it as well. And I just think there's much more creativity there. You get to have a real sense of a place. And yeah, I love style and design. So I think you see more of that there rather than seeing the same thing everywhere you go.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and it definitely appeals to me. There was an initiative I read about over the summer for Oxford Street in London, and I can't remember the name of the organisation that are dealing with it, but the one where some of the places up for rent are being there's an organisation where you can apply as an independent, and they're selecting independent businesses to appear on Oxford Street with, you know, favourable, I guess, financial and lease terms, etc. And I just thought is even that in itself is just such a beautiful initiative to create something that's different and give small independents a platform that they can then grow.
Yes.
Like, oh gosh, you just need that sort of initiative everywhere, really.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely the way to go. How does a small independent business ensure that they stay creative and collaborative when as they start to grow and become successful?
Well, I think for me, well, not just for me, from working with creatives, I think you need a certain amount of headspace to be able to get into your creative zone, whatever that means. It will be different for everyone. And it's so easy. A lot of creative people might set up a business and then the business does well, and then they get dragged into the weeds of the business. And now suddenly, you know, questions are coming in every day. They're losing that headspace to go and have their creativity. So I think space is important. And for me, like in my experience, one of the easiest ways to do it is actually the planning process. And when it's a more collaborative approach, you can more easily take it from, okay, well, whereas the creator, the person whose business it's, where do you want to go? What's your big picture? You know, what are your values and your mission? And how does that break down each year into your annual plan? How does that feed through to each of the individuals? But importantly, if you're doing it in a more collaborative way as you work through, you're making sure individuals are bought into what they're doing. And you can really focus. I mean, the aspect that I focus on is making a strength-based approach. I think so easily, all the way from when we go through, certainly when I went through education, there's a real focus on putting your time and energy into getting better at the things that don't come naturally to you. And we'll all have to do a bit of what's not natural to us. So I'm not saying ignore it, but if you could do at least 80% more focus on stuff that comes naturally, that lifts your spirit, and then go, everyone's doing that, you can achieve so much more. And I think it's actually only when we're really talking and having dialogue, when we're creating the plan, we work that out. Now, it could take a bit longer than just saying, this is a plan, do it, and being a bit dictatorial, but it's a lot stronger. It's a much stronger foundation to work from. And you can build into it how you as a group agree to deal with change, because that's going to happen. No plan will go perfectly. And if you've already discussed how you're going to approach it, when that happens, you can actually pivot and change and adapt much more easily. And I think, again, by putting in a little bit extra time in up front so that everyone's clear on the plan, their part in the plan, how we're going to deal with change, it actually allows business owners to step back out of the business more frequently and with greater ease, because they have the confidence that the team knows exactly what they're doing, what their role in is it, and that they're bought into that plan, they're excited to plan, and they see how it works for them. So I think, I think a lot of it actually comes down to the planning and the method of the planning.
Yeah. And do you find from your experience that in an independent, most of the founders or the CEOs or the whatever term they give themselves, do they generally recruit people that are the same as them or different from them?
I think more often than not, it's human nature. We tend to recruit people more like us. I do work with I call it a strengths profiling system called Talent Dynamics. It's very well known. And it's a way, it's like a type of personality profiling, but it's linked to business cycles and teams, and it looks at how you actually need different types of energies to build a balance of a team. But actually someone who's very, outgoing and people focused would find it difficult probably dealing with somebody who's more introvert, wants to know the timings and lay it all out. So they might resist recruiting that person, but actually they really need them to allow them to keep shining at doing what they best. So if we actually up front say, okay, we need to have people who are different for us, we're going to acknowledge up front that's different, but we're going to celebrate what that difference can benefit, how it benefits us, and how by them working with us it benefits them, because no one's going to ask them to stand up front and talk to a room of people because we've already said that's not for you. So it's all part of that, being very aware of each other's different strengths, different ways of working, and again building that into the plan up front so you don't end up with those like sticky moments where you're like, oh my god, that person's so irritating because, and it's not that they're a bad person, they just think and operate entirely different to you.
And I think that's part of the reason for asking that is because a lot of the work that I've been doing is about when you have different minds that come together because you have different frames of references and perspectives, the creativity and the innovation, that sort of collective whole is so much more powerful, that you can push and grow so much better, quicker than you would if you're all just carbon copies of each other. Which is really important, but I think it takes quite a conscious leader to recognize that and to go against that sort of natural feeling of wanting to recruit a mini me, if you like, which is quite hard. That's amazing. And do you have a specific industry that you like to work with, or a size of company that you like in your sweet spot?
Most of my career I've worked more with like clothing and interiors and sort of lifestyle brands. I've actually done some work in the non-profit space in more recent years. I think the key thing for me at this stage is I'm more focused on if someone's got a business and they believe that business is a force for good, like that's where I want to be, because that's a deep core value of mine. Is I think actually we live in a capitalist system, so if we can flip it so that all business is eventually going in a purpose-driven direction to elevate society or make sure they're helping give back and regenerate nature, then that's how I believe we're going to make the changes we need to do for the good of the planet. So that's really my driving force. I'd love to get involved in sort of more innovation and tech, because obviously there's a massive push in that area. But really I think it's teams of 5 and upwards. I've worked with teams of sort of like 30 people, so between 5 and 30. But it quite varied. But I think that purpose-driven approach is my central value. Because one of the things I found actually, and part of why I've opened up is I work with people remotely, and I worked with a UK brand even whilst I was in Western Canada. But I love in-person stuff. So I'm hoping, I like to pick up some local contracts as well, so I can work with people in person. I'm still planning to pick up UK contracts, because part of the reason I stepped out on my own rather than going straight back into corporate was when I made the move to Canada, I made a commitment to myself. I needed the flexibility to spend more time with friends and family back home in the UK than just 1 or 2 weeks a year. But whereas in the UK, I'd probably quite easily be able to say I'm just focusing on sort of lifestyle and fashion. So far, the driving force of business in Nova Scotia that I'm coming across is the sort of more tech innovation. There's actually a lot of marine, but thankfully, the the process I take people through, it's entirely translatable across any industry. So
yeah. And are you finding that there's more appetite for purpose-driven businesses now than there ever has been?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think even if, just listening to the news or, going through your LinkedIn feed, I think we're seeing more and more of it, especially in the independent business world. And I think part of that's because not all independent business is small, like some of it is absolutely huge, but there is more of an ability in an independent business at any size to pivot and change if they want to. I think when you've got the large corporates, by their size and often by their structure, even if they truly wanted to, it's going to be a lot harder and take a lot longer for them to pivot, and they're more likely to get a resistance to, okay, I really think we should do this, but by the way, you might see a hit on profit for a while, shareholders. That's often not accepted. So I think, again, I think the independent business world it can be a huge driving force for making that happen at a faster rate. And I think that's more where we're seeing it. Yeah.
And of course, like for your clients as well as for yourself, it's pretty challenging setting up your own business, and particularly when you're in a completely different culture and country. How do you look after yourself to make sure that you don't get overwhelmed by the new environment that you're in, and the objectives or challenges or goals that you've set yourself?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of what I do is probably stuff that's just good general stress management. Like, I make a point of ensuring I still do some form of exercise. I love running. I love, walking outdoors, and because I love nature, I like yoga, and I make sure I make time for it. Even on the days I actually don't want to do it, I'm like, just get out the door, get some sunshine in your eyeballs and just do that. I'm a trained yoga and meditation teacher as well. And so I do meditate, but I'd say probably more I use a lot of mindfulness. My running is a huge time when I help clear my head and ease. I do use gratitude, journaling and stuff, because there definitely have been days where I'm like, oh my God, I'm miserable. I can't, I don't even know what I'm doing. That's probably been one of my biggest challenges. I had it's very powerful to have your reason why you're doing something. My why was very powerful. If, I'm being told that you generally are lucky to get 3 weeks vacation. That's the typical over here. In a corporate job, obviously there are exceptions, but I was like, I want to be able to spend like 3 months a year back home. So my why was friends and family, but I didn't actually know what I wanted to do as a business when I started out. So there were definitely times where I'm like, I needed to remember it's okay. And I think alongside that is just keep taking action, just keep at it. And action breeds clarity. So in terms of like moving my business forward and keeping go on that, it is just a case of just keep at it. If you're not sure, try something. And as I say, it's probably only in the last 3-4 months I've got to that new level of clarity of what I'm doing, because my roles have always been kind of general management, so you could do a million different things, and now I've focused in. It's taken years to get there. So I use my exercise, my sort of meditation, mindfulness, and also just making sure I eat good stuff. I know when I'm eating better, I'm feeling better. And then occasionally giving myself a little treat as well. It just it can be challenging. It can definitely be, and this is slightly amusing, but also when you're older, it's more challenging making friends. So so what do you do? It's trying to stay. So, I'm taking an approach now because I'm new here. I'm going to go to different business networking events and different things like that to try and, one, obviously build my business, but two, literally meet people. And as awkward as it sometimes may be, be open about the fact that, yeah, I'm looking to make friends. Yeah, I'm new here. I don't know anyone. So joining a running club. But yeah, that's one of the challenges that I found of moving overseas to somewhere you have no like support network. As an adult, it's not quite the same as when you're a child and you just walk up to each other and say, "Shall we be friends?" Okay.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I was thinking that over the summer when I was in Spain. I think a lot of the Spanish culture is, you live and you grow up and you work and everything in the same area, and you go out as a big group, and that's quite unusual. I think it's really nice to have that community, but it's really, really hard then for the outsider to come in and to infiltrate something that has been there for decades. But yeah, I found a local networking group just recently where, I mean, I think it's because of the purpose of the group.
Yeah,
all of the people there have just been incredible, and I'm like, whoa, this is like really weird how you can like feel that the people there get you immediately.
Yes.
Like when you're a child and those barriers are just down because you don't feel that you're being judged or that somebody wants something from you, which is just so lovely.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's interesting, and I think this was kind of one of the harder shocks of moving to Canada. So I lived in Los Angeles for 3 years with my corporate job, but because Los Angeles is quite a transient place, there's often a lot of people coming in looking to meet people. I was also very lucky to meet one person who then introduced me to their friend network, and we all got on, and that was in my first few weeks. So I was very lucky. But I think that made me think, when my husband and I were deciding, okay, well, are we going to the UK or are we going to Canada? He wasn't sure. And I was sort of like all gung ho. Well, I've moved overseas before, I can do this. But it was harder because one, I moved and 3 weeks later, everything locked down for COVID. Again, I was lucky. When I first moved, I moved to where he'd been for a number of years, and, the wives and girlfriends of some of his friends became friends. I joined a yoga studio, but it's difficult. And then again, obviously moving over here, he knows less people here. So it's very much, it varies by place. And I think that idea of when you get groups set up around sort of, I guess, a shared purpose, you've kind of eliminated a series of things already. You have that central thing in common. I think that's really powerful.
And I hear in a lot of what you do, I suppose I'm very interested in this whole going from doing to being, and I hear there's a lot of being in what you do or how you are in your business. Where do you think that comes from or came from, and what are the challenges that you find with being?
Interesting.
Hard question, sorry.
I mean, I think actually it's been a journey I've gone on probably since I made the decision to move to leave my employed career, move to Canada, set up my own business. That's also when, even though I'd done yoga for many years, it's since 2019, I've now done 500 hours of training. So that's definitely fed into it. But I've just become a much more self-questioning. I would say I've always been fairly self-aware, but I became much more intentional about questioning myself about is that my belief, or is that one I learned and actually it's not my belief? I find, even at an event recently, I just became aware of the fact that, I didn't know lots of people in the room. So I'm chatting away, having lovely conversations. And then a little bit in the back of my head started saying, no one likes you. They wish you'd stop talking to them. I was like, what? And then I actually, rather than just ignore it, I think, well, where's that from? Why on earth is that happening? And I think, you know, probably the two things I live by in recent years are, one, that thing of just keep at it. You'll get there if you keep taking action. And the other thing is just always be willing, you know, the first person you should question is yourself. And I think, you know, and it doesn't need to be pulling yourself apart, but that way it just allows me to be more present. And I think, you know, that naturally feeds through to what I'm doing in my business. But it's actually, it's not something, I mean, it is something I suppose we do touch on quite directly, because it's, again, if you want to pull people together, and again, as I say, a unified team is going to be a stronger team. You know, and I think it also helps get beyond the old adage of it's lonely at the top. It doesn't have to be, actually, you know. You know, if everyone's, you don't have to all be best friends. You can still have hard conversations when hard conversations have to be had, but you can work in unity. But if you're going to do that, you have to have some level of self-awareness. You have to be able to see when you've done something and been like, I made a mess. Let me clear up my own mess, not pass it off or cover it up. I'll just clear it up. And so I think that's a key part of how anyone can be more. And I think once you're willing to do that, it opens up the doors for others to do it, rather than feel like they have to cover up a mistake. They can just be like, oh, I did this. It's like, okay, how will we put it right? And how do we avoid it doing it again?
I completely agree with you. And I think that your point about, you know, what is my role in this situation, it is so powerful. And actually, even if everybody just understood that, that one thing, that would make such a difference to everything, because it's just, it becomes a habit to blame everybody else for everything, when actually we all have a role in everything. And it's there's always something about us that has caused the situation that we're in, and there's always a lesson to be learned for ourselves. What a huge difference it would make if we all had just that tiny bit of self-awareness.
Exactly, hugely so. And I think, you know, for me, it's that combined with, as I say, an alternative look at the structures of business. Like I always think every role in a business has value. You know, it can't even be just on the leader. Like, yes, it really does help. The leader should demonstrate those qualities, because then it gives everyone else permission to own up to errors or to raise their hands and say, I've got a question and I don't know if it's a stupid one, who cares? So it really is the most powerful for a leader to display it. But it's not just down to the leader, every single person. But whereas I think historically, it's like everyone, you know, the big power is at the top and there's all that. And so by default of having that view, the person at a different levels, like, you're being paid all the big bucks, you're the big wig, it is all on you. Whereas if we actually acknowledged and valued every role for the fact that, you know, if there wasn't a barista making coffee in all the Starbucks across the world, there wouldn't be a Starbucks. So it's no good to the CEO. So that role is equally as valuable. And if the cleaner didn't turn up to make sure the Starbucks coffee shop looked good, the staff wouldn't turn up because, so we start respecting every role. And not everyone wants to be a chief exec, you know, but every role needs to be valued, and every person to be able to see their value, their role. And that's down to, again, that level of self-awareness that, you know, just the way they speak to their co-workers, or the way they deal with a problem will have an impact on the overall team.
No, I think that's absolutely amazing. So if people want to find out more about what you do, what your services, etc., what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So they can go to my website, which is therebelflock.com, or find me on LinkedIn. My name is impossible to find me by half the time because there is a million Emma Davieses. So again, you could find me through the Rebel Flock on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my main channel where I'm sharing information on a regular basis. So that's probably the best one. And then they can either DM me, or it's emma@therebelflock.com.
Brilliant. And of course, I'll put your details in the notes that go with the with this as well. So I've really enjoyed talking to you. Do you have any final words of wisdom that you would like to share with people, or words of advice that you could give?
I think all I just say is, you are stronger than you think, and you are braver than you think. So if you're thinking of doing something and you want to try something, just go and do it. It doesn't, I don't necessarily, for some people, it's great, quit your job and do the new thing. That drives them. I actually think I would have worked better the other way, starting something up alongside a job. So depending on who you are as a person, you don't need to quit and go all gung ho on something else. But yeah, if you've got something burning as a desire inside, don't ignore it, follow it.
Love it. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today, Emma. I've loved talking to you. I know we could have chatted on for ages and ages. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.